بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ودونها في الرتبة كرواية برير بن عبد الله بن أبي بردة عن جده عن أبيه أبي موسى وكحماد بن سلمة عن ثابت عن أنس ودونها في الرتبة كسهيل بن أبي صالح عن أبيه عن أبي هريرة وكالعلي بن عبد الرحمن عن أبيه عن أبي هريرة. We completed the discussion on the highest level of Ṣaḥīḥ narrations. So those were the first category. We can now go through the next category, and this also consists of chains which are Ṣaḥīḥ, but they are not of the same caliber of those chains that scholars have graded as Asahul Asanid. Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he says, وَدُونَهَا فِي الرُّتْبَةِ, less than that in rank. Now here when he says وَدُونَهَا فِي الرُّتْبَةِ, that these chains are inferior in rank to the narrations of the first category, then it does not mean that these are just beneath those chains that are graded as the most authentic. Like it is just one level lower, just under those chains that scholars have termed as Asahul Asanid. Rather, there are many ranks which come in between, and these chains are many levels lower. There are many other authentic asanid between the first three examples that Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah mentioned in the first category and the two chains that he brings in this category. So his words here do not mean that these examples of the second category will be number 4 and number 5, meaning that they come immediately after the first rank, but rather it means that these are many levels lower, that there are numerous chains which come in between. You can understand that there are so many authentic chains which come in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim which are not graded as Asahul Asanid. So all those chains will be in between the first category and the second category. Because you will see some scholars, they even doubted whether the examples of this of the second category will make it to be Sahih. So to understand this point, you remember we mentioned in the previous lesson that Imam Hakim rahimahullah, he specified the most authentic chain to specific Sahaba. So if you look at this first example that Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah brought, to who does it link to? Who is the Sahabi? It is Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiyallahu anhu. And there are two links, Burayr ibn Abdullah and his grandfather Abu Burda. So Abu Burda is narrating from Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. However, there are stronger chains which link to Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiyallahu anhu. So scholars, they suggested that there is another sanad that is more authentic that leads to Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. Imam Hakim rahimahullah, he quotes, لا أعلم في الحديث شيئا أحسن إسنادا من هذا شعبة عن عمرو بن مرة عن مرة عن أبي موسى. So can you see that it's a completely different chain, yet Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah is not mentioning that chain here, but that chain is stronger to Abu Musa Ash'ari radiyallahu an. So that proves that even when shortlisting and restricting chains to each companion, like how Imam Hakim rahimahullah suggested, then too we find that there are asanid that are more authentic than those quoted here in these examples that Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah has presented. So if this is the case when the chains are confined to one Sahabi, then you can well imagine that when you are looking at all the asanid mutlaqan, without restricting it to a particular Sahabi or to a certain locality, how many more asanid may exist that are more authentic than the examples which Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah mentioned here. So the point is that there is a great difference between the first category and the second category. And the reason why Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah brought these kind of examples which are so much lower in caliber in terms of authenticity is because what is his objective? His objective is to illustrate and highlight the stark and clear differences of Ṣaḥīḥ narrations. Remember that he made the claim and he said that وَتَتَفَاوَتُ رُتَبُهُ, that the ranks there's discrepancy and they are not all equal. So he needs to now prove this claim of his, and therefore he wants to show you how clear the differences are, that you have those that scholars have actually graded those chains as the most authentic, and now you have these types of chains which scholars are even doubting on whether they would come into this broad category of Ṣaḥīḥ narrations. So many scholars, they regarded these asanid as Hasan li dhatihi instead. That means that the second category is like towards the very bottom of Ṣaḥīḥ narrations, that some scholars have even taken them out of the domain of Ṣaḥīḥ. So look at this first example. He says, كرواية بريد بن عبد الله بن أبي بردة عن جده عن أبيه أبي موسى. So Burayd ibn Abdullah ibn Abu Burda is narrating from his grandfather, who is narrating from his father. The one hand, Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim rahimahumullah, they narrated from Burayd. And they both did not just narrate one hadith from him, rather they narrated quite a few ahadith from him. And they also narrated with this very same sanad here. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he narrated 25 narrations with this sanad in his Ṣaḥīḥ. And Imam Muslim rahimahullah, he narrated approximately 8 narrations with the same chain. That means that these two Imams, they regarded Burayd as reliable, and they also regarded the sanad as authentic. Likewise, Yahya ibn Ma'in rahimahullah, he also regarded Burayd as reliable. He said, Burayd ibn Abi Burda Kufiyun Thiqatun. Alama Ijli rahimahullah, you know, he wrote Ma'rifa al-Thiqat, where he gathered reliable narrators. So there in volume 1 on page 244, he also added the name of Burayd and graded him as a thiqa. He said, Burayd ibn Abdullah ibn Abi Burda Kufiyun Thiqatun. So that means according to all these Imams, Burayd was reliable, and hence this chain of transmission where you have Burayd ibn Abdullah and Jaddi and Abihi is authentic, although it will be from the lowest level of authentic narrations. On the other hand, there are scholars who did not regard Burayd as very strong, and the reason for this was because he made many errors. So you remember we mentioned previously that everyone made errors. Even the greatest of Imams, they slipped up sometimes. They were all human beings. So in this case, some scholars, they would regard his mistakes and his errors as minimal, and therefore they will overlook them and they would regard him as a reliable narrator. But other scholars, they would consider his errors to be a lot, and therefore they feel that he does not fulfill the condition of Tamul Dhabt, and because he does not fulfill this essential condition of Tamul Dhabt, his narrations will no longer be graded as Ṣaḥīḥ, rather they will be graded as Hasan. In Qada al-Watar on page 695, Alam al-Qani rahimahullah, he said, وَبُرَيْد, and then he mentions how to pronounce it, بِضَمِّ الْمُوحَّدِ ثُمَّ رَا مُهْمَلَةً. He said, ثِقَةٌ يُخْطِئُ قَلِيلًا. He's reliable, but he does tend to make mistakes. Likewise, Abdurrahman ibn Abi Hatim, he quotes from his father saying, بُرَيْد رَوَى عَنْهُ الثَّوْرِ فَمَنْ دُونَهُ يُكْتَبُ حَدِيثُهُ وَلَيْسَ بِالْمَتِينِ. He is not very strong. Why he is not very strong? Because he made mistakes. Likewise, Imam Nasa'i rahimahullah, he also considered him to be weak. Ultimately, Alama Dhahabi rahimahullah, he aided him in his book Ar-Ruwat al-Thiqat al-Mutakallam fihim bima la yujab radduhum on page 72. So he said, Burayd ibn Abdullah ibn Abi Burda al-Ash'ari ثقة احتج به. Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim narrated from him في عدة أحاديث, not once but many times. ووثقه غير واحد, that you have lots of scholars who clearly mentioned, like we can see, we just quoted from Yahya ibn Ma'in and Alama Ijli, that they regarded him as reliable. لكن قال النسائي ليس بالقوي. We quoted that from Imam an-Nasa'i rahimahullah. Now, regardless of whether the criticisms against Burayd is valid or not, the fact remains that there were scholars who held reservations against him, whilst other scholars accepted him. So those scholars who had reservations against him, they did not even grade his ahadith as Ṣaḥīḥ, let alone considering his narrations to be on par with those narrations that are asahul asanid. So can you see what a difference it is? That the first category is for such narrations that scholars claimed are the most authentic, and the second category consists of such chains that scholars are doubting on whether the narrations from the second category will even make it to be authentic. So this proves the point that Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah is trying to prove, that although all of these will ultimately be Ṣaḥīḥ, definitely the chains of this second category cannot be of the same rank and of the same caliber as the chains of the first category. So this is with regards to the first chain, Burayd ibn Abdullah an Jaddihi an Abihi Abi Musa al-Ash'ari. Now here there's also another thing with regards to the sanad that Ulama Qasim ibn Qutlabagha rahimahullah raised. So you know that he had a problem with Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah mentioning the word tam in the definition of Ṣaḥīḥ. It is saying that how can a person have complete memory? So here again he pushes this point and he says that if you are saying that tam dabt is essential, then how is it being presented as examples for lower levels of Ṣaḥīḥ? Because these ought to be excluded from Ṣaḥīḥ because they are not fulfilling the essential and integral condition of tam dabt. So he says in kana. Now here one point to show you, in Al-Qawl al-Mubtakar on page 52 he wrote, let's say it's typed out as in kana Yazid ibn Abdullah. So this is how it comes in the printed copy of Al-Qawl al-Mubtakar. The name Yazid is mentioned. But what's the name of the narrator? Burayd. So the way it's typed out Yazid, that is incorrect, and therefore we find that commentators, when they were quoting from Ulama Qasim, then they quoted it as Burayd. For example, Ulama Munawi rahimahullah, Mullah Ali Qari rahimahullah, when they quoted this from Ulama Qasim rahimahullah, then they quoted it with the correct name Burayd. So probably it could be a typo, the way of writing Yazid and Burayd. If you write it on a paper, you will see that it's just a matter of dots which are being changed. That for Yazid you have 2 dots in the bottom, for Burayd you have 1 dot on the bottom. For Burayd there's no dot on top of the second letter, but for Yazid there is a dot on top. So it's just a matter of 2 additional dots, otherwise it's written the same. Al-Qawl al-Mubtakar, they copied it from 3 makhtutat, but yet maybe it's a typo, maybe it was like that in one of the manuscripts. Nevertheless, this is just one point to tell you. So if you have Al-Qawl al-Mubtakar, then you can go there and you can write a small footnote where it's written Yazid to say that it's not Yazid, it's actually Burayd. Nevertheless, so it's in kana Burayd ibn Abdullah tam al-dabt. That if Burayd ibn Abdullah is tam al-dabt, فلا يصح جعله في الرتبة الدنيا, then why place him in the second category? Because his memory is complete, so he has to be going into the first category. وإن لم يكن تام الضبط فليس حديثه بصحيح. Then if his dabt is not tam, then he's not fulfilling the condition of Ṣaḥīḥ, isn't it? So if he's not fulfilling the condition of Ṣaḥīḥ, then how can he can go into a second category of Ṣaḥīḥ? فلا يدخل في أصل المقسم. Mullah Ali Qari rahimahullah, he responded to this objection of Ulama Qasim rahimahullah, and he said, huwa tam wa ghayruhu atam wa asrah. That you can get tam, and above tam you can get those who are even more complete. You know, sometimes you write an exam, the Ustad marks it 101 out of 100. And then he says that's how you can say Ṣaḥīḥ and Asah. So in short, the second category is the highest level of Hasan, or it could be a little higher, and therefore it could enter into the domain of Ṣaḥīḥ narrations. But even if it does enter into the domain of Ṣaḥīḥ narrations, it will be of the lowest level of Ṣaḥīḥ narrations. So there's lots of differences between the first category and the second category. This is the first example that Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmallah presented. Now with regards to the second example, وَكَحَمَّادِ ibn Salama an Thabit an Anas. That Hamad ibn Salama, when he is narrating from Thabit, when he is narrating from Anas. So in this example, Hamad ibn Salama is one of the narrators. Imam Bukhari rahmallah narrated from Hamad ibn Salama 5 times, but he narrated mutaba'atan. He narrated as support. So he did not consider him as a primary narrator. He did not regard him to be of a standard that he can independently narrate an authentic narration which will be suitable for his book. Therefore, Ulama Dhahabi rahimahullah said, قد احتج مسلم بحماد بن سلمة في أحاديث عدة في الأصول وتحايده البخاري. That Imam Muslim rahimahullah, he narrates from Hamad ibn Salama and even narrates usulan as primary narrations. وتحايده البخاري. And Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he maintained caution. وقد نكت ابن حبان كما مر على البخاري ولم يسميه that Ibn Hibban rahimahullah, he criticized Imam Bukhari rahimahullah for this. That Hamad ibn Salama is a reliable narrator. So why did Imam Bukhari rahimahullah choose the narrations of those who are weaker than him over his narrations? He says that حيث يحتج بعبد الرحمن بن عبد الله بن دينار وبابن أخي الزهري وبابن عياش ويدع حمادا. He narrates from all of those kind of narrators, but he does not narrate from Hamad. However, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he quotes from Abu al-Fadl ibn al-Tahir that he said, لم يخرج عنه البخاري معتمدا عليه بل استشهد به في مواضع ليبين أنه ثقة. That Imam Bukhari, we have to at least acknowledge that he did narrate from him متابعة. So ليبين أنه ثقة. وأخرج أحاديثه التي يرويها من حديث أقرانه كشعبة وحماد بن زيد وأبي عوانة وغيرهم. ومسلم اعتمد عليه. Imam Muslim rahimahullah, he relied upon him لأنه رأى جماعة من أصحابه القدماء والمتأخرين لم يختلفوا. So Imam Muslim rahimahullah, he did not have a problem with narrating from him. And like that, many other scholars also, they regarded Hamad ibn Salama to be reliable to such an extent that Imam Ali ibn al-Madini, and you know, we spoke about Ali ibn al-Madini before. You remember, he is one of the greatest teachers of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. And Imam Bukhari rahimahullah had so much regard for him that Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he felt that he could never reach the ranks of Ali ibn al-Madini. So that important teacher of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he said, look at what the words, من تكلم في حماد بن سلمة فاتهموه في الدين فاتهموه في الدين. That this is how it's typed out. There's 2 times in Tahdhib al-Tahdhib. You know, alhamdulillah, we have the best copy of Tahdhib al-Tahdhib, the Darul Bur print. So it's in volume 3 on page 537 there. That whoever speaks against Hamad ibn Salama, then you should actually doubt this person's deen. How can he speak against such a great scholar? Thereafter, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he quotes, وقال الساجي كان حافظا ثقة مأمونا. Look at these words, that he was a hafiz, he was a thiqa, that he was extremely reliable. And just one thing to mention in passing, it comes to mind that, you know, speaking about following your pious predecessors. So Ibn al-Mubarak rahimahullah, he said, دخلت البصرة فما رأيت أحدا أشبه بمسالك الأول من حماد بن سلمة. That when I went to Basra, I haven't found anyone who follows the pathways of the earlier scholars more than Hamad ibn Salama. So you know, our Hazrat Abdul Hamid Sahib, he always mentions that if we want to move forward, then we have to go 1,400 years back. So if we want to move forward in life, we have to take guidance from Khairul Qurun. We have to go 1,400 years back. Then we will be able to move forward. Like, you know, a spring, if you push it down, it will rise higher. So the further back we go, if we go to Khairul Qurun and we take our guidance from there, then we will get a navigation and we will be able to go forward. So that's just a side point. So that's with regards to Hamad ibn Salama. Then in the Sanad, Hamad ibn Salama is narrating from Thabit, this Thabit al-Bunani. Now Hamad ibn Salama, he was the most reliable person to narrate from Thabit. So if there are other students from Thabit who quote a hadith from Thabit in a particular way and Hamad quotes it differently, then we will give preference to the way Hamad ibn Salama quoted it. He was the most reliable person to quote from Thabit. He was an authority when it came to the narrations of Thabit. Yahya ibn Ma'in said, "Man khalafa Hamad ibn Salama fi Thabit, fal qawlu qawlu Hamad." If anyone disagrees and contradict the way Hamad ibn Salama has related something, فالقول قول حماد. Likewise, Ali ibn al-Madini said, لم يكن في أصحاب ثابت أثبت من حماد ibn Salama. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah said, أثبتهم في ثابت حماد ibn Salama. And Ali ibn al-Madini also said, أثبت أصحاب ثابت حماد. So therefore, Imam Hakim rahimahullah, he also took note that Imam Muslim rahimahullah, we're saying that Imam Muslim quoted from him, but Imam Hakim is saying that Imam Muslim did not just quote from Hammad ibn Salama usulan. Rather, he very specifically only narrated those narrations where Hammad is narrating from Thabit. وقال الحاكم لم يخرج مسلم لحماد بن سلمة في الأصول إلا من حديثه عن ثابت. And then he says that yes, متابعة وقد خرج له في الشواهد عن طائفة. That usulan it's very specifically from Thabit, but when he's bringing it as support, then it can be from others. Yet despite being such a strong narrator himself and also being the most reliable narrator from Thabit, there are scholars who had concerns that some liars, they distorted the narrations of Hammad ibn Salama. So the problem was not what Hammad ibn Salama is a person. Rather, the problem was that the enemies of Islam, they got hold of his notes and they distorted all his narrations. Abbad ibn Suhaib, he says, Inna Hammadan kana la yahfaz wa kanu yaqulun innaha dussat fi kutubihi. That Hammad, he would not memorize. Rather, he would write down his narrations. And people would say that his books were distorted. So this is the concern. However, most scholars do not accept this concern. Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he dismissed the saying that the claimant himself is weak. Abbad ibn Sa'ib, he himself does not have any value. So what value will the statement against such a leading scholar hold? He wrote, قلت وعباد أيضا ليس بشيء. And thereafter, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he proves why this claim of his will be incorrect. He said, وَقَدْ قَالَ أبو داود لم يكن لحماد بن سلمة كتاب غير كتاب قيس بن سعد. That he only had one book. يعني كان يحفظ علمه. He would memorize. So Abbad ibn Sa'ib is saying, إن حماد كان لا يحفظ. But Abu Dawud, from what he is saying, we can understand كان يحفظ علمه, that he would memorize. In that statement we quoted earlier, where Hafiz ibn Hajar was quoting from Abu Tahir, the beginning words are وَأَطْنَبُوا لَمَّا تَكَلَّمَ بَعْضُ مُنْتَحِلِ الْمَعْرِفَةِ. People who attributed to knowledge, they are not really knowledgeable themselves. أن بعض الكذبة أدخل في حديثه ما ليس منه. So you can see it's not very reliable scholars who spoke against Hammad ibn Salama. But Hammad ibn Salama, there are lots of statements of scholars speaking about his reliability. Yes, a thing that Hammad has been accused of is that some scholars claim that he suffered from dementia. That when he became older, he started to lose his memory, and that causes weakness in his narrations. Imam Bayhaqi rahimahullah said, وَهُوَ أَحَدُ أَئِمَّةِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. So look at the opening words. وَهُوَ أَحَدُ أَئِمَّةِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. إِلَّا أَنَّهُ, that except that when he became older, سَاءَ حِفْظُهُ, then his memory became weak. Now whether these accusations against him are true or not, all these claims inevitably did impact his narrations. So they did cause the narrations of Hammad ibn Salama to lose value, and hence, despite being the best person to narrate from Thabit, his narrations are ranked lower amongst the Ṣaḥīḥ narrations. That he was the best person to quote from Thabit, but his chain where he is quoting from Thabit, it cannot be considered as Asahul Asanid. No one graded it as Asahul Asanid. And other scholars, they lowered his narrations further, and they did not even regard his narrations to be Ṣaḥīḥ. They felt that his narrations will be Hasan, although they will be from the highest level of Hasan, but ultimately they will be Hasan. They will not make it to be Ṣaḥīḥ. Nonetheless, Ibn Hajar's point is established that although these narrations are Ṣaḥīḥ, they are definitely not on the same level as the first category. They are not of the same level of those narrations which have been graded as Asahul Asanid. To quickly go through the third category, we have 5 minutes left. Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah says, وَدُونَهَا فِي الرُّتْبَةِ كَسُوَيْلِ ibn Abi Salih an abihi an Abi Hurairah. Less than that in rank is this chain. So in this third level, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah brings these kind of examples, and these are much lower compared to the first category, and they are also considerably lower than the second category. That, like how we mentioned that there is a huge distance between the first category and the second category, there is also a huge difference between the second category and the third category. Why? Because this category consists of narrators who are known to make even more mistakes than those of the second category. So there were even more doubt on these narrators, and many more scholars would not regard their narrations to even make it in the domain of Ṣaḥīḥ. So for example, if you look at this first chain here, Suhail ibn Abi Salih, he is narrating from his father. So when we say Suhail ibn Abi Salih an Abihi, then you already understand who his father is, isn't it? He is Abu Salih, and he is narrating from Abu Hurairah. So like we're saying that there are many chains in between the second and the third group. Abu Zur'a rahimahullah, he gave preference to another chain over this chain. So someone came to Abu Zur'a and they asked him which will be the stronger chain, that Wasu'ila an Ja'far ibn Muhammad an Abihi, or he mentioned this chain here, Suhail ibn Abi Salih an Abihi, or Ala ibn Ala an Abihi, ayyuma asah. So what did Abu Zur'a, a master of hadith, what did he say? La yuqranu Ja'far ila ha'ula. That you cannot even compare Ja'far ibn Muhammad an Abihi with these. It's like someone is asking you which is a better car, a Toyota or a BMW, a second-hand Toyota or a brand new BMW. There's no comparison. So you read Ja'far arfa min ha'ula fi kulli ma'na. So that shows that there are chains which are much stronger than this, and they are lower than the second category. Nonetheless, Suhail is reliable. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he quotes one narration from him, but when Imam Bukhari rahimahullah brought that narration from him, he made sure to also quote the support that there is for that narration. So he clarified that Yahya ibn Sa'id also narrates that same report from Suhail. So look at the sanad that Imam Bukhari rahimahullah brought. He says, حدثنا إسحاق بن نصر قال حدثنا عبد الرزاق قال أخبرنا ابن جريج قال أخبرني يحيى بن سعيد وسهيل بن أبي صالح. So can you see, he did not just quote it from Suhail alone, rather he made sure to also present a support of a very reliable narrator. So he says that Yahya ibn Sa'id narrated in Suhail ibn Abi Salih أنهما سمع النعمان بن أبي عياش عن أبي سعيد الخدري رضي الله عنه قال سمعت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول من صام يوما في سبيل الله بعد الله وجهه عن النار 70 خريفا. So when you go to madrasa, then you are in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, isn't it? Attending this dars, you are in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you have to fast, then you will be put a distance of 70 years from Jahannam. And if you fast multiple times when you go madrasa, you will go even further and further from Jahannam. If you just fast the Monday and Thursday fast, you will get the reward of Sunnah also. And say maybe you attend madrasa fasting on Mondays and Thursday for 40 weeks of the year. So you will be distanced for a duration of 70 years, 40 times. So what is 40 times 70? 7 times 4 is 28. So in 1 year, you will be 2,800 years away from Jahannam. In 10 years, 28,000 years away. And then if you add the fast of Ayyam al-Bid, you will be so much further. It will be impossible for you to ever go to the fire, because you will be so far from the fire, you won't even go close to the fire of Jahannam. I'm saying you, but I'm referring to myself as well. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us all with tawfiq. Nevertheless, there are so many hundreds of narrators from whom Imam Bukhari rahmallah would narrate from without mentioning any support. But here, the one and only time that he quotes from Suhail, he made sure to mention support. So this shows that all those narrators who Imam Bukhari rahmallah narrated from without mentioning support, he was very confident and comfortable to narrate from them. They are all stronger than the narrations of Suhail. And this again shows that there are so many asanid which are more authentic than this. Imam Muslim rahimahullah, he narrates freely from Suhail ibn Abi Salih, usulan wa mutaba'atan. And there were other scholars who also regarded him as reliable. Then there are those scholars who regarded him as a saduq. And as we go through the kitab, you will learn that saduq is a term that is used for a narrator whose narrations are graded as Hasan. Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah himself actually in Taqrib al-Tahdhib, he said, صدوق تغير حفظه بآخرة. So that's the first example. Quickly to go through the second example. وكل على ابن عبد الرحمن عن أبيه عن أبي هريرة. With regards to Ala ibn Abdul Rahman, Imam Bukhari rahimahullah did not narrate at all from him. Imam Muslim rahimahullah, he did narrate from him like more than 20 times. But then there are many scholars who spoke against him. Imam Tirmidhi rahimahullah, he graded most of his narrations as Hasan Ṣaḥīḥ. Inshallah, very soon we'll be reaching the chapter and discuss what Imam Tirmidhi means when he says Hasan Ṣaḥīḥ. Ultimately, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he graded it as Saduqun Rubama Wahima. So that means his narrations will be Hasan. Now obviously a narrator like this cannot compare with a narrator of the first category like Imam Zuhri rahimahullah, and a chain like this cannot come close to a chain of the first category. So from all the examples that we mentioned, the grades of asanid differ to such an extent that some of the asanid from the second and third categories will actually be regarded as Hasan. And this here can be coupled with the statement of Imam Zahabi rahimahullah, where he mentions in Al-Muqidha wal-Hasanu dha rutba duna tilka al-maratim faja al-Hasan مثلا في آخر مراتب الصحيح, that probably Hasan can sometimes come into the domain of Sahih. Ultimately, the objective of Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah has been obtained and proven. There are different grades and levels amongst Sahih narrations. Inshallah, we'll continue from here. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Subhanallah wa bihamdih. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu.